I'm Morgan Lawrence, 29, and last Friday I received a gilt-edged invitation to my Uncle William's estate. The Lawrence family rarely acknowledges my existence, so why the sudden summons to Hillcrest Manor? My hands trembled as I opened it, wondering if they'd finally accepted me, despite choosing teaching art over joining the family business. My late father walked away from their fortune years ago, making us the black sheep. That decision haunts me still, especially when facing his wealthy brother. Before I tell you how this dinner turned into the most humiliating night of my life, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if family drama makes you grateful for your own relatives. Growing up, I never fully understood why we lived in a modest three-bedroom house while my cousins had mansions with swimming pools and tennis courts. My father, Jonathan Lawrence, was the younger brother of William Lawrence, CEO of Lawrence Industries, and the patriarch of our extended family. When my grandfather died, both brothers inherited equal stakes in the family business. But my father chose a different path. Money changes people, Morgan. He would tell me while working on weekend art projects in our garage studio. I watched it happen to William. I didn't want that for us. My mother passed away from cancer when I was only 6. The medical bills were substantial, but my father never asked his wealthy brother for help. He worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, while raising me with values centered around creativity, compassion, and finding purpose beyond material wealth. After graduating with an art degree, I chose to teach elementary school art rather than pursue a more lucrative career. My father was the only one who fully supported this decision before his heart attack 3 years ago. His funeral was the last time the entire Lawrence family gathered in one place. My cousins make no effort to hide their disdain for my life choices. Elizabeth, 36, manages the family trust fund, but has never worked a real job. At Christmas 2 years ago, she examined my handmade necklace and asked if I was still doing that crafting hobby. Her brother James, 32, holds the title of vice president at Lawrence Industries, despite having no qualifications beyond his last name. Last Thanksgiving, he loudly wondered if my students' parents knew their art teacher couldn't cut it in the real world. Uncle William has always been the most intimidating figure in the family. Standing 6'3" with steel gray hair and piercing blue eyes, he commands every room he enters. 5 years ago, at my cousin's wedding, he cornered me by the bar. "Your father had such potential," he said, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler. "Such a waste. And now you follow his footsteps, teaching finger painting when you could be building something meaningful." I hadn't spoken to him since that night, which is why the formal invitation delivered by courier struck me as unusual. The heavy cream cardstock requested my presence for an important family dinner at Hillcrest Manor, the sprawling Lawrence estate overlooking the city. "Maybe they want to reconcile," suggested my best friend Haley when I called her in confusion. "People change, Morgan. Maybe your uncle is trying to make amends before it's too late." I wasn't convinced. The Lawrences don't do reconciliation. They do business and appearances. "Then go find out what they want," Haley insisted. "You'll always wonder if you don't. Besides, your dad would want you to give them a chance." That last point hit home. Despite everything, my father never spoke ill of his brother or encouraged me to cut ties with the family. He believed in forgiveness and second chances, even when people didn't deserve them. The invitation specified formal attire, which created another problem. My teacher's salary doesn't accommodate designer gowns. After searching through 3 thrift shops, I found a simple black dress that looked elegant enough with proper accessories. Haley loaned me her grandmother's pearl earrings and necklace, transforming my outfit into something I hoped would pass Lawrence family inspection. As I prepared for the dinner, I practiced responses to inevitable questions about my career and lifestyle. I would be polite but firm about my choices. I would not apologize for following my father's example. I would maintain my dignity regardless of how they treated me. Little did I know that dignity would be the only thing I had left by the end of the night. The drive to Hillcrest Manor took 40 minutes, the city gradually giving way to exclusive suburbs and eventually the winding private road leading to the Lawrence estate. My 10-year-old Honda looked increasingly out of place among manicured landscapes and security gates. When I finally pulled up to the circular driveway, I felt like an imposter, as valets in crisp uniforms parked Bentleys and Mercedes. A young attendant approached my car with visible confusion. "Are you making a delivery?" he asked, eyeing my vehicle skeptically. "I'm Morgan Lawrence," I replied, handing him my invitation. "Uncle William's niece." His expression shifted immediately. "Of course, Miss Lawrence. My apologies." The damage was done, though. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as I watched him reluctantly park my car between two luxury vehicles. The butler who greeted me at the massive oak doors barely concealed his disdain. "Miss Morgan," he said stiffly, "the family is gathered in the west parlor." He didn't offer to take my coat or show me the way, clearly expecting me to remember the layout of a house I'd visited perhaps 5 times in my life. After an awkward minute of wandering, I found the right room. The space was filled with about 20 people in formal attire, crystal glasses of champagne in hand. Conversation halted briefly as I entered, followed by manufactured smiles and curious glances. Elizabeth approached first, champagne flute dangling between manicured fingers. Her crimson gown probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. "Morgan, darling," she air-kissed near my cheek. "How brave of you to wear something so affordable. Vintage is very in this season among certain crowds." I forced a smile. "Thank you for noticing. Sustainability matters to me." "Of course it does," she replied with a patronizing smile. "James, look who's finally arrived." My cousin detached himself from a group of men in expensive suits. "Well, if it isn't our cousin the finger painter," he announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Everyone, this is Morgan, our charity case cousin who teaches art to snot-nosed kids instead of making something of herself." Several guests chuckled politely. One woman in diamonds asked, "Is that fulfilling? Working with children instead of building a career?" Before I could answer, James interjected, "Morgan likes simple things. Simple job, simple car, simple life. Not everyone has ambition, right, cuz?" For the next half hour, I endured similar interactions. Guests discussed their recent trips to Bali and Switzerland, debated which private schools were worth their astronomical tuitions, and compared notes on investment portfolios. When I mentioned my upcoming summer art program for underprivileged kids, conversation quickly shifted to tax benefits of charitable donations. I spotted Uncle William across the room, holding court with what appeared to be business associates. He caught my eye briefly, nodded in acknowledgement, but made no move to greet me. The message was clear. I wasn't worth his immediate attention. While getting a glass of water from a server, avoiding the alcohol to keep my wits, I overheard 2 women speaking in hushed tones around the corner. "That's the disappointment?" one asked. "The one in the thrift shop dress?" "Yes," replied the other. "William says she'll finally get what she deserves tonight. Apparently, her father thought he was too good for the family business, and the apple didn't fall far from the tree." "Well, she certainly doesn't look like a Lawrence," said the first woman. "Imagine choosing to be poor when you could have all this." I retreated to a quiet corner, checking my phone for distraction. I texted Haley, "Something feels wrong about all this. Everyone's acting strange, and I think they invited me here for a reason." Her reply came quickly, "Trust your gut. You can leave any time." But my father's voice echoed in my head. "Never let them make you feel less than you are." He had faced this family's judgment for decades without breaking. I could manage one dinner. As the butler announced dinner would be served shortly, I noticed staff setting up a small podium near the head of the dining table. It seemed formal even for a Lawrence family dinner. Whatever was planned, I had a sinking feeling it involved me, and not in a good way. The dining room at Hillcrest Manor exuded old money with its crystal chandelier, ancestral portraits, and mahogany table that could seat 30. I found my name card at the far end, separated from Uncle William by 12 place settings. Not coincidental, I suspected. The menu featured dishes I barely recognized. Amuse, bouche foie gras terrine, and other French delicacies I couldn't pronounce. When the first course arrived, I stared at the array of silverware, trying to remember which fork to use. I reached for what seemed appropriate, only to notice Elizabeth's smirk from across the table. Wrong choice, apparently. "Morgan, called James from halfway down the table. "Do they serve caviar in the school cafeteria? Or is it all chicken nuggets and applesauce?" Several guests chuckled. I smiled tightly. "You'd be surprised at the sophistication of elementary school lunches these days. Last week we had quinoa bowls." "How progressive," Elizabeth chimed in. "Tell us again how much teachers earn in your district. Is it enough for a vacation this year?" "We're planning 3 weeks in the south of France. Nothing extravagant, just a little villa we're renting." The conversation continued in this vein, deliberately highlighting the wealth gap. Guests discussed country club memberships, second homes, and recent luxury purchases. When someone mentioned their new boat, they turned to me with faux concern. "Do you sail, Morgan?" "Oh, that's right, water activities probably aren't in a teacher's budget." During the third course, Elizabeth reached for the salt and accidentally knocked over her wine glass. The red liquid splashed across the table and onto my borrowed dress. "Oh dear," she said without a hint of genuine remorse. "I'm so clumsy tonight. But I suppose that dress couldn't have cost much to replace." As servers rushed to clean the mess, I dabbed at the stain with my napkin, feeling every eye on me. "These things happen," I managed to say, though my voice trembled slightly. The pearls Haley had lent me now had droplets of wine on them. I'd have to get them professionally cleaned, another expense I hadn't planned for. Uncle William's business partner, a silver-haired man named Richard Thompson, turned his attention to me after the commotion settled. "Morgan, William tells me you teach art at a public school. I imagine an art teacher's salary barely covers rent in this city, let alone building any meaningful investments." Before I could respond, James raised his glass. "A toast to my cousin Morgan," he announced. "While the rest of us waste our time building businesses and managing family assets, she's found the secret to happiness. Living simply and painting with children. Some might call it underachieving. Morgan calls it life purpose." He smirked. "To simple living." Several guests raised their glasses, some looking uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge the obvious mockery. I lifted my water glass slightly, maintaining eye contact with James until he looked away first. The dinner continued with increasingly pointed comments. Elizabeth's husband questioned whether I had retirement savings. A family friend wondered aloud if my apartment was one of those subsidized housing situations. Someone else suggested I could marry up to solve my financial limitations. Each comment felt like a paper cut, small but painful, and accumulating rapidly. I maintained my composure, remembering my father's advice to never show them weakness. But inside, my emotions churned between humiliation, anger, and confusion about why they'd orchestrated this elaborate setup just to belittle me. During a brief respite while servers cleared plates, I excused myself to the restroom. In the hallway, William's longtime housekeeper Gloria, who had always been kind to me as a child, stopped me briefly while carrying a tray. "Your father would be proud of how you're handling yourself, Miss Morgan," she whispered. "Don't let them see they've gotten to you. That's what they want." Her unexpected support nearly broke my composure. In the ornate bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the gilt-edged mirror. My face was flushed, and the wine stain on my dress stood out starkly against the black fabric. I took several deep breaths, remembering how my father had weathered decades of this treatment without losing himself in the process. "You are not defined by their opinions," I whispered to my reflection. "Your worth isn't measured by their standards." With renewed determination, I returned to the dining room just as dessert was being served. Something in the atmosphere had shifted. The casual cruelty had been replaced by an air of anticipation. Whatever they had planned for the evening was approaching its climax. And based on the subtle smiles exchanged between Elizabeth and James, I suspected the worst was yet to come. As servers placed elaborate chocolate desserts before each guest, Uncle William stood and tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The gentle chiming silenced all conversation immediately. Every eye turned toward the family patriarch, his commanding presence enhanced by the bespoke tuxedo and generations of wealth behind him. "Before we indulge in Chef Marcel's exceptional dessert," William began, his deep voice resonating through the room, "I've gathered you all here tonight for an important family announcement." My stomach tightened. The strange invitation, the strategic seating, the escalating mockery, everything had been building to this moment. William gestured to his assistant, who activated a projector I hadn't noticed earlier. A document appeared on the wall behind him, bearing the Lawrence family crest and legal terminology. As many of you know, Lawrence Industries was founded by my father, and upon his death, ownership was divided between myself and my younger brother Jonathan. He paused, glancing in my direction. Despite Jonathan choosing to abandon his responsibilities to the family business, the original succession plan maintained his 25% stake in the company, which would transfer to his heir upon my death. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Some guests looked surprised. Others, like Elizabeth and James, wore expressions of satisfied anticipation. After considerable reflection on what best serves the Lawrence legacy, William continued, pressing a button that changed the projected image to a new document. I have made the necessary legal arrangements to ensure our family's wealth remains with those who uphold our values and vision. The new document highlighted amended sections of what appeared to be his will. Even from my distance, I could see my name had been struck through in several places. Effective immediately, I have restructured the inheritance plan. The stake previously allocated to Jonathan's line will be divided between Elizabeth and James, who have demonstrated proper commitment to our family's principles and business interests. Scattered applause broke out. Elizabeth didn't even attempt to hide her triumphant smile. James winked at me from across the table. William raised his hand for silence. Some family members have proven themselves unworthy of the Lawrence legacy. Those who reject our values shouldn't benefit from our success. The projection changed again, showing what appeared to be financial projections. The 25% stake in question represents approximately $78 million at current valuation. This is not a decision I've made lightly, but it is necessary to protect what we've built over generations. $78 million. The figure hit me like a physical blow. I had known, abstractly, that my father had walked away from substantial wealth, but hearing the specific amount made the magnitude of his choice, and what William was now taking from me painfully concrete. To ensure legal clarity, William continued, I've had our attorneys prepare comprehensive documentation. There will be no contestation possible. His gaze finally fixed directly on me for the first time that evening. Morgan, while you have chosen to follow your father's misguided path, I am not without some familial sentiment. The room went deadly silent as William reached into his jacket and removed an envelope. He handed it to his assistant, who walked the length of the table and placed it before me. A token compensation for your time tonight, William explained as I stared at the envelope without touching it. $500 should cover your transportation costs and the unfortunate wine incident. Someone gasped softly. Another person coughed uncomfortably. Most guests suddenly became very interested in their desserts, avoiding looking at me directly. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a check for exactly $500 made out to Morgan Lawrence. The memo line read, Final family settlement. The humiliation was complete. They hadn't invited me to reconnect or reconcile. This entire elaborate dinner had been orchestrated for one purpose: to publicly announce that I was officially cut off from the family fortune while forcing me to endure their mockery. The $500 check was the final insult, a pittance meant to emphasize the vast gulf between what could have been mine and what they deemed me worth. I sat frozen, the check resting on the table before me, aware of every eye in the room, watching for my reaction. The silence stretched uncomfortably as William returned to his seat. Mission accomplished. Elizabeth raised her freshly filled wine glass. To family legacy, she announced, her voice dripping with satisfaction. To proper succession, James added. As glasses clinked around the table and conversation cautiously resumed, I remained motionless, feeling the last connection to my father's family severing permanently. The check, not even worth the wine stain on my borrowed dress, lay before me like a final verdict on my value in their world. I stared at the check, Uncle William's neat signature at the bottom blurring as I fought back tears. The buzz of conversation around me seemed distant, as though I were underwater. $500. The exact amount that said I was worth acknowledging but not respecting. Too much to be nothing, too little to be something. Someone asked if I was feeling unwell. Someone else suggested I should be grateful for Uncle William's generosity given my life choices. Their voices merged into white noise as a storm of emotions built inside me. I thought about my father, how he'd walked away from all this wealth without regret, how he'd worked double shifts to pay for my art supplies, how his hands had grown calloused from honest work rather than soft from counting inherited money. I thought about his funeral, where Uncle William had spoken for exactly 3 minutes about my younger brother Jonathan, without a single personal anecdote or genuine emotion. The fog of shock began to lift, replaced by something unexpected: clarity. I looked around the table at my so-called family. Elizabeth, on her third marriage, drinking more wine than water throughout the evening. James, with his artificially whitened smile that never reached his eyes, who I'd overheard earlier mentioning his latest stint in an exclusive rehab facility. Uncle William, who had 3 adult children, none of whom had attended tonight's dinner or apparently spoken to him in years. All their wealth, all their status, all their power, and what did they have to show for it? Empty relationships, hollow achievements, manufactured happiness. My hands stopped trembling. I placed my napkin on the table and slowly stood up. The room quieted again, all eyes returning to me. I saw the expectation in their faces. They wanted tears, pleading, perhaps anger they could dismiss as jealousy or bitterness. They wanted final confirmation of their superiority. "Thank you for the lovely evening," I began, my voice soft but steady. "And thank you, Uncle William, for finally being honest about where I stand in this family." I picked up the check, looking at it thoughtfully. "You know, my father never told me exactly why he walked away from all this. He never spoke ill of any of you. Even when he was struggling to make ends meet, he never regretted his choice." Taking a deep breath, I continued, my voice growing stronger. "Now I understand why. He recognized what true wealth looks like, and it isn't this." I gestured around the opulent dining room. "True inheritance isn't just money or property or stocks. My father left me creativity that can't be quantified, integrity that can't be bought, and the ability to find purpose beyond accumulation. He taught me to create rather than simply consume." I looked directly at Elizabeth. "When was the last time you made something with your hands instead of just purchasing what others created?" Her eyes dropped to her plate. Turning to James, I asked, "When did you last feel genuine pride in work that was solely your own achievement, not handed to you because of your last name?" Finally, I faced Uncle William. "And you surrounded by everything money can buy, but estranged from your own children. Was it worth it, trading family for fortune?" The silence in the room was absolute now. I carefully tore the check into small pieces, dropping them into Uncle William's still full wineglass. The paper fragments floated on the dark red surface, slowly absorbing the liquid and sinking. "What none of you know," I continued, "is that my father didn't completely abandon the family legacy. 10 years ago, he used his portion of grandfather's initial inheritance, the only money he ever accepted, to establish the Lawrence Community Arts Center in the city's underserved East Side. He did it anonymously, never seeking recognition or praise." Several guests exchanged surprised glances. This was clearly news to everyone. That center now provides free arts education to over 200 children every year. Children who discover their own worth through creativity rather than currency. That's the legacy I'm proud to continue. That's the inheritance that matters to me. I straightened my wine-stained dress. "You can keep your $78 million. I inherited something far more valuable. The knowledge that my worth isn't determined by my bank account, and the understanding that the richest people aren't always those with the most money." Without waiting for responses, I walked toward the exit. As I passed the server's station, Gloria the housekeeper gave me a subtle nod of respect, the barest smile touching her lips. No one called after me. No one tried to stop me. The stunned silence followed me through the grand hallway and out the massive front doors. The cool night air hit my face as I descended the steps, each step feeling lighter than the last. Only when I reached my car, the humble Honda, now feeling like a badge of honor rather than an embarrassment, did the emotions finally break through. Inside the privacy of my vehicle, I gripped the steering wheel and let everything pour out. Deep, body-shaking sobs mixed with screams of frustration and, surprisingly, laughter. The absurd theater of wealth and cruelty I'd just witnessed seemed both devastating and darkly comical in retrospect. I cried for my father, who had faced this family's judgment for decades. I cried for the little girl who had always felt not quite good enough around her cousins. I cried from the humiliation of being so publicly devalued. But as the emotional storm gradually subsided, I realized I was also crying from relief. The pretense was over. The false hope of family reconciliation could finally be laid to rest. And most importantly, I had stood my ground and spoken my truth in a room designed to intimidate me into submission. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free of the Lawrence family shadow. I drove straight to Haley's apartment, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. The city lights blurred through my tears as I replayed the evening in my mind, each memory bringing fresh waves of hurt and indignation. By the time I parked outside her building, my emotions had cycled from shock to grief to anger and back again several times. Haley opened her door, took one look at my tear-streaked face and wine-stained dress, and immediately pulled me into a fierce hug. "What happened?" she asked, leading me to her couch and wrapping her softest throw blanket around my shoulders. The story poured out of me in fragmented bursts. Uncle William's announcement, the inheritance I never expected, but was now officially denied, the humiliating check, my impromptu speech before leaving. Haley listened without interrupting, her expression shifting between disbelief, outrage, and pride. "Those absolute monsters," she finally said when I finished. "They set you up. They invited you there specifically to hurt and humiliate you." $78 million, Haley, I whispered. The number still incomprehensible. That's what my father walked away from. That's what they just took from me, even though I never expected it or counted on it. Money they didn't earn, Haley reminded me. Money that gives them the privilege to be terrible people without consequences. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout our conversation. I finally checked it to find multiple texts and missed calls from Lawrence family members. From Elizabeth. "Your little performance was unnecessary and embarrassing. Uncle William was being generous considering your attitude toward family responsibilities." From James. "Always knew you were unstable like your father. Way to burn the last bridge." And most surprisingly, a voicemail from Uncle William himself. "Morgan, your behavior tonight was unacceptable. You will return to Hillcrest Manor tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss your actions and the damage control needed. This isn't a request." "They still think they have power over you," Haley observed, as I played the messages for her. "They can't fathom that you'd choose to walk away from their world." Without hesitation, I blocked all their numbers. Whatever relationship we might have salvaged had been destroyed by their orchestrated humiliation. I had said my piece. There was nothing left to discuss. The next morning, Haley organized an impromptu gathering at her apartment, our small circle of friends arriving with coffee, pastries, and heartfelt support. My colleague Brian from school brought flowers. My neighbor Tara brought homemade cookies. My friend Marcus from the community center brought art supplies. Knowing creativity was always my best therapy. To Morgan, Haley toasted with a coffee mug, who has more class in her pinky finger than an entire mansion of rich snobs. As I looked around at these people, none wealthy or powerful, but all genuinely caring, the contrast with last night's cold, calculated gathering couldn't have been clearer. These were real connections, not transactional relationships based on status or advantage. The following Monday, returning to my classroom, felt like entering a sanctuary. My first graders immediately noticed my subdued mood, and several brought me hand-drawn cards during lunch break. For Miss Lawrence, when she's sad, read one, decorated with rainbow hearts and an impressive attempt at drawing my face. These small, authentic gestures of care began healing what the Lawrence family had tried to break. Each sincere good morning from a colleague. Each enthusiastic hug from a student, each moment of creating art with children who saw it as magic, all reinforced that I had made the right choice in following my father's path. 3 days after the dinner, I received an unexpected visitor at school. Gloria, Uncle William's housekeeper, waited outside my classroom after dismissal. "Miss Morgan," she said, clutching her purse nervously, "I hope you don't mind me coming to your workplace. I wanted to bring you something." From her bag, she withdrew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were several old photographs I recognized from Hillcrest Manor, pictures of my father as a young man, some including me as a small child. "Mr. William ordered most family photos with your father removed years ago," Gloria explained. "But I saved these. I thought you should have them." As I thanked her, she hesitated before adding, "There's something else you should know. The family isn't as financially secure as they pretend. Lawrence Industries has been struggling for years, too much competition, too little innovation. That's why Mr. William changed the will when he did. He's protecting what's left of the fortune." This revelation shifted my understanding of the dinner's urgency. It wasn't just cruelty. It was desperation disguised as strength, a last power play from a failing dynasty. Gloria left after extracting my promise not to reveal her visit. Her parting words stayed with me. "Your father was the only true gentleman in that family. I see him in you, the same integrity, the same kindness." That weekend, Brian invited me for coffee to discuss the situation from a legal perspective, as his brother specialized in inheritance law. "Based on what you've told me," he said carefully, "there might actually be grounds to contest William's changes. If your father never formally relinquished his ownership stake, and if William made these changes under specific circumstances, you could potentially have a claim." The idea of fighting for the inheritance briefly tempted me, not for the money itself, but for the principle, the acknowledgement that my father's choice didn't negate his rights or mine. But pursuing legal action would mean engaging with the Lawrences again, being pulled back into their toxic orbit. It would mean defining my worth through their terms, their assets, their world. "I think my father would say some prices are too high," I told Brian, "even when the potential payoff is $78 million. Instead, I channeled my energy into what truly mattered: my art and my teaching. I started a new series of paintings entitled Inheritance: Abstract Explorations of What We Pass On Beyond Material Wealth. The act of creation became my therapy, transforming pain into beauty in the way my father had taught me. One week after the disastrous dinner, I stood before my class of third graders, demonstrating how to blend colors to create depth in their landscape paintings. The simple joy on 8-year-old Emma's face when her mountains suddenly looked real reminded me why I'd chosen this path. "Miss Lawrence, look!" she exclaimed, holding up her painting with pride that no stock portfolio could ever generate. "That's beautiful work, Emma," I replied, meaning it sincerely. "You've really captured how light changes the mountain's appearance." These moments, genuine connection through creativity, had always been my measure of success, though I'd sometimes questioned it when facing my family's judgment. Now, without their shadow looming over me, I found renewed passion for my work. My personal art was also flourishing. The Inheritance series had expanded to 12 canvases, each exploring different aspects of legacy and value. My small studio apartment barely contained them, paintings leaning against every wall as I worked through my emotions with color and form. When the local arts collective announced their spring showcase, I submitted 3 pieces without expectation. To my surprise, all were accepted and prominently featured in the gallery space. At the opening night reception, I stood nervously beside my work as visitors circulated with wine glasses and commentary. My painting, Birthright, an abstract piece contrasting cold metallic elements with warm, organic forms, attracted particular attention. "This is remarkable work," said an older woman in sleek black glasses, studying the canvas intently. "The tension between inherited expectation and personal truth comes through powerfully." I'm Diane Bennett, art critic for the City Journal. By the end of the evening, Diane had written a glowing review on her phone, to be published the next day. A small gallery owner from the Arts District had offered me a featured show in the fall. 3 visitors had left their cards, interested in purchasing pieces when the exhibition ended. The unexpected success brought healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each affirmation of my artistic voice helped counter the Lawrence family's dismissal of my choices. Each genuine connection through my work reinforced that I'd chosen the right path. The following week, I found myself facing another unexpected opportunity. The director of the community arts program where I volunteered approached me about applying for a substantial grant to expand their offerings. "We need someone to lead the initiative," she explained. "Your background in both education and fine arts makes you perfect for this. The Lawrence Center has done amazing work for a decade, but we could do so much more with proper funding." The irony wasn't lost on me. The center my father had anonymously founded, now offering me a chance to build something meaningful under the Lawrence name, just not in the way Uncle William would have approved. I threw myself into developing the grant proposal, envisioning expanded programs for underserved youth, partnerships with local schools, and community art installations that would transform neglected neighborhoods. While researching successful applications for similar grants, I discovered an unexpected connection. The foundation offering the funding had previously awarded grants to several arts organizations established by Rebecca Lawrence Cohen, Uncle William's estranged daughter. I had met Rebecca only a few times as a child. 15 years older than me, she had left the family fold before I was old enough to really know her. Like my father, she had rejected the family business, pursuing nonprofit work instead. Uncle William had reportedly disapproved of both her career choice and her marriage to environmental attorney David Cohen. After hesitating briefly, I sent her a message through the foundation's contact form, explaining the connection and my current project. I didn't expect a response, but 2 days later, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Morgan? This is Rebecca Lawrence Cohen. I can't believe you reached out. I've been following the situation with Dad and the inheritance announcement." I nearly dropped the phone. "How did you know about that?" "Gloria," Rebecca explained. "She's kept me updated on family matters for years. She told me about your impressive exit speech. I wish I could have seen Dad's face." Over coffee the next day, Rebecca and I discovered how much we had in common, despite the age gap. She had faced similar pressure and judgment from the family before ultimately breaking away 20 years earlier. "Dad cut me out of the will when I married David," she explained. "He couldn't accept that I wanted to use my privilege and education to help people rather than accumulate more wealth." As our conversation deepened, Rebecca revealed something that changed everything. "I've been going through some old documents from Grandpa's estate," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "Dad may have overplayed his hand with this inheritance business. Based on the original company charter, your father never actually relinquished his ownership stake. He just declined to actively participate in management." The documents she'd brought contained legal language establishing that my father's share of Lawrence Industries remained legally his, regardless of his participation level. According to the company's founding documents, those rights would transfer to his heir me upon Uncle William's death, regardless of any subsequent will changes. "Dad can change his personal will all he wants," Rebecca explained, "but he can't unilaterally alter the company charter without board approval, which he never sought because he didn't want anyone questioning his authority." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying that when Dad dies, you legally own 25% of Lawrence Industries, despite his little dinner theater performance." The realization landed like a thunderbolt. All the public humiliation, the elaborate announcement, the condescending check, none of it had any actual legal standing. It had been pure intimidation theater. That evening, I consulted with a lawyer specializing in corporate governance who confirmed Rebecca's assessment. While Uncle William could withhold dividends and benefits during his lifetime, he couldn't permanently sever my inheritance rights as established in the original charter. I faced a significant decision. I could keep this information to myself, simply waiting for nature to take its course. Or I could confront Uncle William with the truth that his grand gesture had been legally meaningless. The old Morgan might have remained silent, avoiding conflict. But I had found my voice at that dinner table, and I wasn't willing to surrender it again. I started by creating a self-portrait for my exhibition myself, surrounded by representations of my true inheritance: creativity, resilience, integrity, compassion. Around the canvas edge, I incorporated subtle text from the original Lawrence Industries charter, including the critical succession language that protected my father's stake and now mine. As I put the finishing touches on this most personal piece, I made my decision. This wasn't about money, it had never been about money for either my father or me. This was about truth and acknowledgement. I would pursue legal confirmation of my rights, not out of greed, but as an assertion that the Lawrence legacy belonged to all branches of the family, including those who defined success differently than Uncle William. The portrait, titled simply Heir, became the centerpiece of my exhibition. Through art, I had reclaimed my narrative from those who had tried to diminish me. Through legal action, I would reclaim my rightful place in the family business, not to join it, but to ensure it eventually served a purpose my father would have approved. 6 months after the infamous dinner at Hillcrest Manor, I stood on a small stage in the newly expanded Lawrence Community Arts Center, ribbon-cutting scissors in hand. The journey to this moment had transformed both the center and me in ways I could never have imagined on that humiliating night. The legal process had moved surprisingly quickly once I presented the original company charter documents. Uncle William's attorneys initially blustered and threatened, but when faced with the irrefutable language of the founding documents, they quickly shifted to settlement negotiations. I made only one demand: formal acknowledgement of my father's ownership stake and my status as his heir. I didn't want dividends or board positions. I wanted truth. The settlement negotiations had taken an unexpected turn when I proposed using a portion of the disputed funds to expand the community arts center my father had established. Whether from guilt, public relations concerns, or perhaps a flicker of genuine remorse, Uncle William had agreed. The Lawrence Foundation, the family's philanthropic arm, had provided a multi-million-dollar endowment to the center, ensuring its programs would continue for generations. The facility had been renovated and expanded, with new studios, classrooms, and a gallery space named in honor of my father. Today's ribbon-cutting ceremony marked the official opening of the expanded center. The crowd included students, parents, local artists, city officials, and surprisingly, Uncle William himself, standing stiffly near the back. Elizabeth and James were conspicuously absent. According to Rebecca, who had become both ally and friend, they had been furious about the settlement and blamed me for manipulating their father into diverting family funds to finger painting for poor kids, as James had reportedly put it. After the ceremony, as guests explored the new facilities, Uncle William approached me. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, the strain of recent events evident in the deeper lines around his eyes. "Impressive program you've developed here," he said, gesturing around the bustling center. "It was my father's vision," I replied. "I'm just continuing his legacy." He nodded slowly. "Jonathan always did see things differently than the rest of us." After an awkward pause, he added, "Your father would be proud." I studied his face, searching for insincerity but finding only tired resignation. "Yes," I agreed. "He would be." That brief exchange was the extent of our reconciliation, and I was at peace with its limitations. Some bridges, once burned, can't be fully rebuilt, but perhaps a narrow footpath across the chasm is enough. As Uncle William departed, Rebecca joined me, linking her arm through mine. "So, cousin, how does it feel to be a Lawrence family rebel like me?" "Liberating," I admitted with a smile. Though I never expected to find family through losing family, if that makes sense. Our unexpected kinship had been one of the most positive outcomes of the past 6 months. Rebecca's experience navigating life outside the Lawrence orbit had provided both guidance and reassurance that I wasn't alone in choosing purpose over privilege. The center had become the heart of my professional life as well. While continuing to teach elementary school art, I now directed the center's youth programming on evenings and weekends. My personal artwork had gained momentum too, with my first solo gallery show scheduled for the fall. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very family rejection meant to diminish me had instead catalyzed the most significant growth of my personal and professional life. When I shared this observation with my attorney during our final meeting, she had offered a perspective that stayed with me. Inheritance takes many forms, Morgan. Some people inherit money, some inherit values. The luckiest inherit both. But those who inherit strong values can always generate their own wealth, financial or otherwise. Those who inherit only money are vulnerable to losing everything if they haven't developed the character to manage it wisely. This wisdom resonated deeply with my experience. While I would technically inherit significant financial assets someday, my father's true legacy was the foundation of values that had allowed me to stand firm against the pressure to surrender my authentic self. 2 weeks after the center's opening, I met with an estate planning attorney of my own. Though my assets were modest compared to the Lawrence fortune, I wanted to ensure that whatever I built creatively, professionally, and eventually financially would continue supporting arts education for children who might otherwise never discover their creative potential. My will now included provisions for a trust that would fund scholarships and programming at the center, as well as support for other community arts initiatives across the city. It was my way of extending the inheritance of values my father had given me, creating a legacy based on purpose rather than accumulation. This sense of purpose manifested in unexpected ways. After one of my students confided that she was struggling with family pressure to pursue a practical career instead of her artistic passions, I found myself sharing a version of my own story. There will always be people who measure success by bank accounts and job titles, I told her as we worked on her portfolio. But the real question is, what kind of life will make you feel fulfilled when you look back on it someday? What values do you want your life to demonstrate? The girl Emily, a talented 16-year-old from a family situation uncomfortably similar to my own, considered this carefully. I want to create things that help people see beauty in unexpected places, she finally said, like you do with your teaching and your art. Her words touched me deeply, highlighting how the inheritance of values continues across generations, not through blood or legal documents, but through connection and example. As I put the final touches on my latest painting, a family portrait that now included Rebecca and other chosen family members, alongside traditional family, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in 6 months. The Lawrence family dinner had been intended to diminish me by declaring me unworthy of their financial legacy. Instead, it had freed me to fully embrace the far more valuable legacy my father had actually left. The courage to define success on my own terms, the integrity to stand firm in my values, and the creativity to build something meaningful from whatever materials life provides. What began as my most humiliating night had become the catalyst for my most authentic life. As I sign this painting, the final piece in my inheritance series, I want to ask you, what's the most valuable thing you've inherited from your family, whether through blood or chosen connection? Have you ever had to defend your life choices to people who measured success differently than you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video so others can find it too. Thank you for witnessing my story. And remember, the most important inheritance isn't what's in your bank account, but what's in your heart.